What's up, fam? Dr. O here, and I want to talk about the charges of anti-Semitism that have been labeled against POCC. Now, for those who don't know what POCC is, the People of Color Conference, and within that, there's a student division of the conference called the Student Diversity Leadership Conference, which is hosted every late November, early December by NAIS, the National Association of Independent Schools, the largest independent school, private school network in the country. Now, I'm not somebody who's paid staff at NAIS or anything like that, but I'm speaking to you as somebody who has attended the last two conferences and was there for the events or parts of the events that have led to charges of anti-Semitism. I've also been a keynote speaker at NAIS or POCC multiple times as well, including when these charges of anti-Semitism originated from. I am also somebody who has more than a 20-year history of working with Jewish organizations. I've spoken at the US Holocaust Memorial Museum. I've worked with organizations like Jewish World Watch and several others that are escaping me at the moment. I don't work or speak at organizations that I consider to be anti-Semitic. When Kanye West was out there talking his language about Hitler and Hitler being smart or whatever, he likes him or whatever, I was out there calling him anti-Semitic as well, even though I grew up listening to Kanye West. But I actually started to dismiss Kanye West because he was anti-black before he was anti-Semitic. That's a conversation for another day. Look, people have called People of Color Conference a festival of Jew hate. Now, let me be clear what I'm talking about today. One, I'm talking about POCC. Two, I'm going to be talking about college students not being able to debate. And three, I'm going to be talking about how Trump is becoming president and how we need to be uniting as opposed to fighting against each other. So let's start with POCC. When I spoke at POCC last year at the SDLC portion of the conference, and there were several Jewish students, and this is late November, early December, so this is, not too long after October 7th happened, the original October 7th date, not this past year. Uh, and several of them came up to me and were talking about how my comments, my speech made them feel seen, made them feel whole, because obviously since October 7th, they were dealing with lots of things going on in this country. And the response to October 7th as well, they've been dealing with a lot of things. And this was at the POCC conference. And I've actually been in touch with several of those Jewish students after the conference about potentially coming to their school and so on and so forth. Has that ever gotten reported? Has ever got so what happened after I spoke at SDLC last year? There was a student who was not a paid conference person who was not on the agenda. There's a student like Speak Out, right? Where somebody came up and said some things that I was not there for that portion that some people found to be anti-Semitic. Some people in the audience did not find to be anti-Semitic. My daughters were in the audience and were listening as well, and they're very in tune to the language of anti-Semitism. But for a year, people have been dragging that out, whatever this student said in a speak out, to such an extent that one newspaper, I believe it's the New York Times, correct me if I'm wrong in the chat, threatened to release this student's information, the information of a child who said something that was against what was happening in Gaza. So did not take the words of the speakers, the paid people who were there, but took the words of a student and have been running with that narrative for a year. Fast forward to this year, and the comments that were made by Professor Susan Barakat about Israel and the Israeli state that people look at as anti-Semitic. And then I was not there for that. Then Dr. Ruha Benjamin spoke. I was backstage while she was speaking and left for halfway through the speech because I had to go. And my issue is this. The People of Color Conference itself is not an anti-Semitic organization. If people have disagreements with what people are saying on stage, then what is being said on stage should be challenged. It should be talked about. It should be discussed, right? This is a 3-4 day conference, and people are pulling statements from two people who charges of anti-Semitism for many people is debatable, and a lot of people don't even agree with that charge. But to want to shut down an entire organization, an entire conference, because of disagreements with comments that were made by two individuals that are debatable by many as to whether it's anti-Semitic. Professor Barakat talked about how she wept over what happened on October 7th. And she talked about, talking to Biden about needing to stop anti-Semitism and Islamophobia and the like, right? But I understand people did not want to focus on that because of what she talked about as it relates to the foundation of the Israeli state. But here's the challenge that we're having now. One student talked about not feeling comfortable and hiding their Star of David at the conference. And the question that I would have was there any anti Semitism that was directed to students at the conference? Because what I know about NAIS and POCC is that those teachers, those educators, those students will go to bat to challenge anti Semitism in any way, shape, or form as it appears in their school. The challenge that I have with these charges of anti Semitism is that people are losing potential allies and partners in the real fight of anti Semitism that we have to deal with from the Trump administration, as we saw happen when he came into office in 2016. When we're talking about book bans and people are banning books like Mouse, the graphic novel about the Holocaust and the like, it's POCC educators that would fight that book ban, that would want to have everything taught about the Holocaust in the classrooms, that would want that actively do work to challenge anti-Semitism in their classrooms and in their schools. I know these educators, just like Professor Benjamin would do as well, just like Professor Barakat would do and talks about as well. Those 8 to 10,000, I don't know, people who come to that conference do everything they can to make people feel safe, all students feel safe in their schools. Now, look, I'm speaking as a black man in America. I've gone to many conferences where I've heard people say things that were racist or that connoted racist ideas. I didn't put that as a marker on the whole conference. I looked at ways to either engage the conference or find those speakers and engage them later. I grew up in an educational system that was absolutely anti black my entire life. I learned to challenge what I've been told. Are you a woman watching this right now? Did you grow up in a sexist system in this country? Did you challenge it or shut everything off? This leads to, and I can go down the list of different groups who've had to deal with different challenges to their being in classrooms or in conferences and have worked to find common ground. This leads me to the challenge I have with the college experience. I'm a professor at American University where I teach intercultural communication among other classes. And what I am seeing now is that so many students of diverse backgrounds, this is not just about Jewish students at all, so many students of diverse backgrounds have not learned how to have their ideas challenged. They are coming into the classroom, and as soon as they're challenged on an issue, they shut down, they get belligerent, or they even walk out. And I tell my students, in our class, we challenge everything. We question everything. Here's a question I have for y'all. As Myron Golden said, would y'all rather have answers you can't question or questions you can't answer? Right? Because when you have answers you can't question, that means that anytime somebody says something that challenges your sensitivity or beliefs, you're automatically shutting down. I asked a question about the LGBTQ community because there were several in the class that identified as that, but this was a general question for everybody. And several of the students who were LGBTQ had no problem with the question because it wasn't coming from a place of dominance or I know better and all of that. It was just a question because in our class we ask questions. But one student who identified as part of that community got so angry and walked out and didn't come back to my class for after 2 weeks because I said I didn't have the right to challenge. I had students who, and I wasn't challenging, I was questioning. There's a difference. I understand the difference. I've had students who are all Black Lives Matter all day who I've questioned about an issue, shut down. I've had people who are Jewish students, who are Muslim students, who, challenge, shut down. Now, this isn't for all my students. I have students of all of these backgrounds, Jewish, Muslim, Black, LGBTQ, who have no problems with conversations, with debate, with having ideas challenged, because that's what college is supposed to be about. But if we're teaching our students in elementary school, middle school, high school, that as soon as you hear something that makes you feel uncomfortable, to shut it down, leave away, run, so on and so forth, now students are coming into classrooms, going into conferences with tape recorders. So they can record things and take a snippet and put it on social media or go back to their parents. And the parents are calling the schools and saying, you need to apologize for this. And again, this is not just Jewish students. I'm seeing this from all different backgrounds, and we're losing by doing this way. And that is a problem. And why is this a problem? Because Trump is about to be president. And yes, there are absolutely anti-Semitic things that have been said that come from the liberal side of the world in this country. There's no question about that. But if we're going to talk about proportionality, the actual violence that people within the Jewish community are experiencing in this country comes at the hand of people who represent these extreme views on the quote unquote what people call the right. I call them extremists on the extreme conservative side of things, right? The synagogue shootings, in Pennsylvania, and the attacks and so on and so forth. Generally speaking, that type of violence is coming from people who are pro-Trump. And so when we see what's happening now, this man's about to take office once again. People who are part of POCC, people who are part of organizations like the Anti-Defamation League and other, we need to be uniting and coming together to fight the bigger threat to the Jewish community. You don't see people because, look, I'm no historian, but what I see as it relates to the Trump administration is Trump cares more about is Jewish people in Israel than he does about Jewish people in the United States. And that's why he's had a rhetoric about them need to have, he's had that Holocaust-esque rhetoric, that Hitler-esque rhetoric about Jewish people who don't vote for him needing to have their heads examined and not being loyal and all of that other type of stuff. And I think that that's really problematic. And I think that that's why Jewish Americans tend to vote more Democrat than they do for this guy in the last elections that he ran in, because they know the language and know what's happening. And so I feel like there are allies and partners within POCC. I'm speaking from experience, who are doing the work to fight ignorance and hate. And when we do this work and people try to shut it all down because of comments of two speakers that weren't even the entire proportion of their entire speech, we can't shut down ideas. We can't shut down thought. We can't shut down entire organizations that are working for the common good. Has there ever been any conversation about all of the other incredible things that are happening at POCC that make people feel seen of all backgrounds? My job, my work with UPstander International is to do the work to help organizations find common ground in these uncommon times. And the fact of the matter is, we're going to have our disagreements about Israel, about Gaza, Palestine, all West Bank, all of those things, just like we're going to have disagreements about Black Lives Matter versus All Lives Matter versus gay marriage versus trans rights and so on and so forth. But we who are part of POCC, we who are part of these organizations like the Anti-Defamation League, we believe in common humanity. And we have to do the work to find out, because there are forces that are working against both of these organizations, POCC types, ADL types, and the like. And we can't shut this down. We can't shut down Jewish scholars, the Omar Bartovs of the world, who have their thoughts that may differ from some of the other organizations. We need to work together for the greater good. I stand by my belief that POCC is, as a matter of fact, before Professor Benjamin spoke, I spoke. I was on that stage again. And I don't believe that charges of anti-Semitism should be labeled at them. And I don't believe charges of anti-Semitism should be labeled at that conference. What I do believe, those organizations who have put out letters disagreeing with their comments, who have wanted to talk about having a conversation and working together, that's what we need. But for Professor Barakat to possibly have to deal with the same fate as her brother and sister-in-law who were killed in Islamophobic attacks because of what was said, and I've posted the entire transcript of her speech on LinkedIn, because we all need to start from the same departure point so we can have the same conversation, because a lot of people are spewing out stuff, haven't listened to the speech or read it. We have a bigger threat looming for those of us who believe in social justice, for those of us who believe in common humanity. And I believe for those who are part of Jewish organizations that are doing real work to challenge anti-Semitism, and I support that, I believe that you are losing a potential partner in portraying POCC the way it has been portrayed. And as somebody who has been there, who has been part of it, it is not that organization. And we all, as Peter Beinart talks about, we need to work with all students. He talked about Jewish students need to learn how to listen to challenges without feeling like they are being personally assaulted. He talks about that. And there are many other Jewish scholars and activists and organizers who are doing the same thing. Because look, for those of y'all who are Jewish, for those of y'all who are not for those of us who are not Jewish, many of us don't look at the government as of Israel as representing all Jewish people. We differentiate, many of us differentiate between Jewish people and the Israeli government. And some of these debates that I'm hearing are not allowing for that. Again, would you rather have answers you can't question or questions you can't answer? So look, you all, I'm here coming out with a spirit of peace here. I'm coming out with a spirit of somebody who's done the work in challenging anti-Semitism. I'm somebody who's done the work in challenging all forms of hate, which is why I've worked at POCC, and I'm willing to work with any school, any organization, any company that wants to continue to have this conversation to find common ground in these uncommon times, because we need to unite more than ever before, because we're having a presidency that's coming in that's going to be more anti-Semitic for the people in this country probably than it was before in 2016. And it's going to be more anti-Black, more anti-LGBT, more anti-LGBTQ, more anti-Latino, more anti-trans, more anti-anything that doesn't represent rich, white, cisgendered men. And we need to have strength in numbers and not get caught up in this divide and conquer. We need to do the work. And I'm here for it. And I hope you are too. Peace.